Have you ever wondered what people truly see when they look at you? Is it the person you are, or simply the sum of what you own? Deep in the bustling veins of Lagos, amidst the chaos and color of Nigeria's beating heart, lived a woman who would soon find out. Her name was Adora Obialo, and though her origins were simple, her story would become a legend whispered in market stalls, office towers, and jam-packed buses. From the outside, Adora was the image of quiet beauty and noble grace, a woman whose presence made people pause, yet whose gentle ways never revealed the sharp intelligence that always danced in her dark eyes. She was Chief Obialo's daughter, the only child of the self-made man whose rise from hardship to billionaire status was the stuff of local folklore. In the echo of her father's legacy, her own voice often melted into the background, allowing her to become the silent observer when everyone expected her to be the main event. Growing up in the Obialo mansion meant that Adora's world was wrapped in a velvet cocoon. The finest boarding schools, custom-tailored dresses flown in from Paris, holidays to cities most people only dreamed of. Her father spoiled her, not because he had to, but because he believed she deserved the best. But where other daughters of fortune pranced and postured, Adora was a soft melody amidst the loud drums. She wore her wealth like a second skin, never flaunting it, never letting it dictate her worth. Her closet was full of designer outfits, but her favorite clothes were simple and clean. She avoided loud makeup and never competed for attention, preferring instead to simply watch. There was always something in her that set her apart, a secret reluctance to embrace everything that money could buy. But all the silk, gold, and comfort in the world could not shield Adora from heartbreak. When Chief Obialo's life abruptly flickered out, a hush fell across Victoria Island. The funeral, a spectacle in itself, closed roads for miles. Expensive cars, opulent robes, mournful drums. Grief was performed as if for the city's theater. Yet, in the midst of the ceremony, there was only one figure the crowd tracked: Adora, clad in unrelenting black, her eyes hidden behind dark glasses. It was there, at the edge of her father's grave, that her new life, one twisted by secrets and tests, was about to begin. Behind dark glasses, Adora's tears flowed freely. Despite the grandeur of the burial, despite the crowd jostling for a glimpse of the family's sorrow, she felt almost invisible. Even in the deepest grief, she noticed everything: the whispers at the graveside, the jealous glances from distant relatives, the hollow words of comfort that meant little more than the rustle of the wind. When the final handful of sand fell upon the coffin, Adora lingered as others retreated, locked in her private agony. It was only when a voice, familiar, yet now suddenly foreign, called out that she stirred. "You know he left you everything, right?" The deliberate weight behind the words told her this was not a condolence, but an alert. Turning slowly, she found herself facing her husband, Chick, a man whose beauty made many heads turn. a man for whom ambition flickered just beneath his smooth smile. Today, his tall frame was swathed in a white captain's tunic carved with gold, the sadness on his face expertly rehearsed, his eyes betraying absolutely nothing. "What did you say?" Adora asked, her voice small and tight. "Your father, he left you everything. The company, the estates. You are the Obielo now," Chick replied, lips curving into a smile she'd never trusted. Adora's silence spoke louder than any argument. She nodded, turning away, not just from her husband, but from the world she'd always known. That conversation was only the latest in an ongoing chorus. Since the news of her father's passing, every interaction had changed. Lessons bloom. Uncles she barely remembered. Cousins who'd sneered at her as a child. Even her mother's distant relatives. They'd suddenly become her shadow. Their calls overflowed with tears, demands, reminders of old favors barely given. Everyone wanted something: respect, money, approval, their own piece of the Obialo legacy. The burden was heavy, made heavier by the knowledge that even Chick, whom she'd married less than a year earlier, now eyed her not as a partner, but as a ticket. Events after the funeral blurred into one long parade of grasping hands. Each time she picked up the phone, Adora steeled herself for performances of need, guilt, and entitlement. It was as if the city itself had transformed into a hungry beast, now circling her life, sniffing for weakness, for an opening. Yet in those hours of isolation, sitting beneath her father's portrait in her bedroom, Adora began to form a dangerous idea, one that would test not only her closest ties, but the very foundation of her own heart. That first night after the funeral, the mansion felt like the shell of what it had been, opulent yet cold. For Adora, the loss was more than just her father. It was a shredding of the last layer of innocence. Alone in her room, the city's distant noises blending with her own heartbeat, Adora cradled her childhood photograph with Chief Obialo. She whispered to the silent frame, "Daddy, they only loved you for your money. Now they're doing the same to me." In the shadows, a question grew, insistent and unsettling. What if I wasn't rich? Who would still love me then? Her mind raced with the possibilities. Would Chick, who used to hold her hand so fiercely, still believe in their bond? Would family remember her for anything beyond what she could give? As the moon traced patterns on the floor, Adora's resolve solidified. She would test the love surrounding her. She would make her wealth disappear. When the sun finally rose, Adora dialed the number for her father's trusted lawyer, Mr. Mardu, a man whose wisdom and loyalty had been tested by years of Obialo secrets. "I want to hide what's left," Adora stated, voice controlled. "I want everyone to think I've lost everything." The old man hesitated. "Are you certain, Adora? This is a dangerous game. It'll change everything." But she was resolute. "I have to know the truth." So began the meticulously orchestrated scheme. Signatures and legal sleight of hand buried her assets in secret trusts. Bank accounts evaporated overnight. Her controlling shares shuffled into corporate shadows untouchable. Newspapers shrieked. Obialo dynasty folded. Heiress destitute. Reporters hounded her. Former friends pretended to care. Each call, each text was just a probe. How much do you have left? When can you send support? Even her uncle phoned brazenly. I hope you can still support the village project, eh? I just lost everything, Adora replied, her voice icy. Yes, but you're Obialo's daughter. Don't tell me you're now actually broke. The call ended with bitter finality. But beneath the legal chaos and staged scandal, only one thing mattered to Adora. Would anyone love her now that everything was gone? Bloom. The transformation from billionaire's daughter to beggar was as swift as it was total. Within days, Adora found herself in a sparsely furnished flat on the edge of the city. No servants or security, no lavish comforts, just a single room, a bed, and the barest essentials. The mansion, seized in the spectacle of shame, now belonged to the city's gossip, its gates closed with faux official tape. Chick, until now detached and cold, finally paid her a visit. His greeting was a mixture of disbelief and contempt. Is this a joke? He spat, eyes scanning the bare room as if it were contagious. No, Adora replied quietly, watching him more carefully than ever. So you're telling me we're broke? I am. Not we, I am, she repeated, enunciating every word. Chick's reaction was sharp and cruel. Same difference. We're married, aren't we? He knocked back a glass of water, his irritation obvious. You could have warned me, he complained. I needed to be sure, she said. Sure of what? He shot back. That you married me, not for my name, not for money. Chick's face contorted with a mix of anger and disbelief. So what? This is some test? You're punishing me? The answer came in silence. Chick left, not slamming the door, but making it clear love had become a transaction in his mind. Alone again, Adora embraced her resolve. Let the test begin, she whispered to the four peeling walls. That first night, in near poverty, she learned a truth she had always suspected. Few people can handle sudden loss. Fewer still can love in the absence of comfort. Each day revealed further truths. Chick's affection, already eroded, vanished as he realized the hardship was real. Former friends vanished into silence. Family became cruel. Only her own will, scuffed but unbroken, remained. This isn't just a test anymore, she admitted one bleak evening. It's survival. The days that followed were a masterclass in humility. Where once breakfast was laid out on silver platters, now Adora managed plain bread and weak tea with trembling hands. When Chick appeared, his pride stung by circumstances, his displeasure was palpable. This is what we're eating? He sneered. It's what we have, she answered, masking pain with polite resolve. There was no gratitude, no understanding. Eggs, luxury food, were dismissed bitterly. No money yet for eggs? I thought you were the same Adora Obialo, he mocked. She repeated herself. Everything is gone, Chick. This is real. His anger exploded. Do something. This life is not for me. She retreated, unwilling to let him see her cry. But the indignities multiplied. Chick began to treat her like a burden, coming home late, refusing basic conversation, even selling off her father's gifts without asking. Every day became a ledger. How much money was left, how long before rent, what food remained. Eventually, even the smallest kindnesses vanished. When Adora begged for help, Chick spat the refrain, "Ask your father's ghost." Her spirit endured, refusing to let cruelty transfigure her own heart into something ugly. Eventually, the tension erupted. "You married me for love, right?" Adora demanded one stormy night, trapped by generator blackouts and stifling heat. Chick snapped, "No, I married you for your name and your father's money. That's the truth." The confession was the sharpest cut yet, stripping away every last illusion she had cradled. Still, she would not collapse. "All that's left now is me," she said, voice quivering but determined. "And I will not break." Subscribe and hit like. Our powerful stories add years to your life. Join our Story Lovers Club and let us know in the comments. Where are you listening from? Adora quickly discovered that isolation is bitterest when tinged with betrayal. The walls of her barren flat seemed to close in tighter with each passing day. The silence, once a source of reflection, became suffocating as time stretched onward, and her phone barely rang. She waited, almost childlike, for messages from family or calls from friends, just a whisper of the world. If not to offer support, at least to ask, "How are you?" Yet the lines stayed quiet, save for the rare, cold inquiry about her remaining resources. The very people who had once begged her for sponsorships and social introductions now barely acknowledged her existence. Invitations to luncheons, weddings, and charity balls dried up like towels left out under the scorching Lagos sun. Her name, a badge of status for so long, had swiftly become a liability. In these quiet moments, Adora felt the sting of truth settle in her bones. Memory became her only companion, laughter echoing through marble halls, the delighted faces of relatives at her father's parties, her mother's soft encouragement in days past. All of it seemed like scenes from another life, viewed through a pane of frosted glass. The harshness of the world pressed in tighter, but Adora resolved that she would not let bitterness take root. She recognized, beneath her pain, a seed of something new, a strange, small freedom in being ignored. With no one left to impress or appease, for the first time in her life, she was free to be more than the sum of her last name. The experience was humbling, yet curiously liberating, like a bird realizing the cage door is open, only after everything else is gone. Night after night, Adora gazed out her lone window, watching the city lights flicker. Determined as ever, she promised herself never to stoop to the level of those who hurt her. She would carry her dignity, threadbare but hers, through even the darkest times. If she emerged from this test intact, she knew she'd be stronger for it. Yet loneliness, a new enemy, hovered always just out of sight, and every hour brought fresh doubts and questions about her strength. One afternoon, the doorbell rang. Expecting nothing more than a bothersome bill collector, Adora faced the peephole cautiously. It was her uncle, her father's elder brother, a man who had spoken of honor but practiced only self-interest. Dressed in an expensive agbada, he radiated impatience before even crossing the threshold. When Adora opened the door, his eyes flickered with mingled disdain and pity. "Ah, so it is true. You are finished," he declared, glancing around the flat as if searching for proof of her destitution. "Uncle, I have nothing left to give," Adora replied, matching his tone with a coolness she barely felt. Undeterred, her uncle pressed on. "Your father owed me respect and support. You have a duty to this family, Adora." His words dripped with the entitlement of a man who'd never lifted a finger for her in return. For years, he'd ridden the wave of her father's generosity, taking advantage of every opportunity without so much as a grateful word. Even now, when her world had collapsed, he sought to wring a final drop from the dry well. "I am sorry, uncle. There is nothing more I can do." Her voice was steady, firm, a boundary finally drawn after decades of acquiescence. Seeing his demands thwarted, her uncle's mask dropped. He spat some final insult before storming away, muttering about ungrateful children. Even in humiliation, he refused to back down from entitlement. The confrontation left Adora shaken, but as the door slammed shut, she exhaled deeply, purging old burdens from her chest. Every such encounter became a lesson. Charity is forgotten faster than a debt among those who count blessings by banknotes. That evening, when the loneliness returned, Adora reached for her diary. In its pages, she cataloged every loss, every slight, and every empty promise. "Let the world see who cared," she wrote with a fury she had never known before, "and let them live with the truth." She felt lighter, freer, even as the darkness pressed in. The loss of material wealth exposed other bankruptcies, most notably those of friendship. Adora had not been naive. She'd always suspected that many relationships in her life were transactional, maintained with gifts and invitations, and cemented by the Obialo name. Yet, the swiftness and coldness of her social exile still wounded her deeply. The silence from her circle of friends was far more striking than the absence of any luxury in her life. She watched from a distance as parties continued, as mutual acquaintances posted gleeful snapshots online, their laughter louder without her included. Only one friend attempted to remain, Aisha, a childhood companion whose own family had known both feast and famine. Aisha turned up unexpectedly at the flat one rainy evening, umbrella clutched tight against the storm. "I heard. I'm so sorry, Adora," she whispered, embracing her with a kindness that squeezed the tears from Adora's eyes. Unlike everyone else, Aisha did not ask for explanations or solutions. She only listened, preparing tea on the battered stove without comment. "You know, you are more than your name. You always have been," Aisha said quietly, meeting her friend's watery gaze. Some people were only around for what you could give. But you gave people dignity. You gave people hope. In that moment, Adora understood that while suffering strips away the false, it leaves behind gems, real love, rare as diamonds, fiercely beautiful in its clarity. Their conversation stretched late into the night, the storm outside fading into gentle rain. Aisha promised to keep checking on her, and for the first time in weeks, Adora felt the beginnings of hope. The next morning, she looked at her own reflection, tired, thinner, but no longer anonymous or lost. She resolved to fight not just for survival, but for her own definition, a life on her terms, loving those who proved themselves worthy, not simply those who demanded or expected. In a world obsessed with appearances, the power to decide who truly mattered was the most valuable inheritance of all. As the weeks dragged by, survival became more challenging, each day blurring into the next, hunger and exhaustion sharpening both wits and wounds. Money dwindled to almost nothing. Every trip to the market was an exercise in restraint, every bill a fresh threat. Even so, Adora refused to give up the last shreds of self-respect. She could have begged her former friends or called in favors long ago, but pride and principle locked her lips. Above all else, she was determined to emerge from this storm with dignity intact. Chick, meanwhile, became both more distant and more volatile, lashing out for little reason, his words poisonously sharp. Sometimes she caught glimpses of the man she loved, the charming confidant, the gentle partner who once whispered dreams into her hair. But those moments were fleeting, drowned by resentment and blame. He accused her constantly. Why didn't you fight to keep your father's company? Why can't you fix this? Never once did he ask, how are you? Not as a partner, but as a dependent, resenting his provider's fall. Twice, Chick left for days at a time, returning only to retrieve more valuables to pawn. The home, their supposed sanctuary, became a battleground, suffused with tension. Yet, even when tempted to throw him out and lock the door forever, Adora hesitated. This was her test, she reminded herself, and part of her still clung to hope that he might choose love over comfort. The irony bit deep. In her darkest hours, she gave others every chance to prove themselves, even as her own faith flickered. Then, one evening, Chick did not return at all. The night dragged into morning, and Adora sat by the window, her fear and anger intermingling until they were indistinguishable. She prepared herself for the possibility that he was gone for good. 3 days after Chick's disappearance, just as Adora began drafting letters to the landlord in anticipation of moving again, there was a soft, uncertain knock at the door. She hesitated, heart thudding, prepared for bad news or another disappointment. She reluctantly opened the door to find Chick on the other side. But the man before her was not the proud, bitter figure she remembered. Chick looked beaten, his clothes wrinkled, eyes rimmed with exhaustion. Without preamble, he slumped onto the small sofa and covered his face in his hands. "I couldn't find peace anywhere," he said at last, voice hoarse. "Not at my friends, not at my mother's. Everyone asked what happened to the money. No one wanted me without your name, without the Obialo comfort. I thought they cared. His admission fell like a stone into the silence. For the first time since their disaster began, Chick's mask dropped. Vulnerable and raw, he admitted his own pain and the fragile pretense of his relationships. It's all gone, every bit of it, he confessed, tears glistening on his cheeks. Not just the money, but my pride, my illusions. I know I failed you, Adora. I was angry and weak. The rawness of his confession cracked open Adora's guarded heart. She moved to comfort him, not out of obligation, but because compassion demanded it. They talked deep into the evening, voices hoarse, tears blurring the boundaries of shame and forgiveness. For the first time, their roles seemed level. Not heiress and opportunist, but two flawed people, stripped bare by circumstance. By morning, something fragile but unmistakable had come alive again between them. They made a truce, even as nothing outside their flat had changed. Survival was still a daily struggle, but now they faced it with a renewed sense of partnership, wounded, wary, but determined not to be alone. After that night of raw honesty, the air between Adora and Cheek was changed. The heaviness of their shared losses lingered, but for the first time, the silence was bearable, filled with mutual understanding rather than unspoken hostility. Though their circumstances remained dire, the newfound vulnerability sparked something resembling hope. Living with almost nothing stripped their days to basics. Searching for work, counting coins, making meals from whatever was left in the pantry. Adora found work as a shop assistant in a bustling market, where the rhythm of ordinary life offered her a kind of therapy. Chick, shaken from complacency, began laboring for a delivery business. Together, they stitched a fragile routine from scraps of dignity and shared hardship. New challenges arrived with every sunrise. Scraping together money for rent was never guaranteed, and hunger frequently gnawed at their resolve. But Adora faced each setback with a courage she hadn't known she possessed. Braving insults from customers, she learned to blend patience with assertiveness. Where before she would have shrunk from conflict, now she met it head-on, resolving disputes with a calm born of suffering. Chick, too, changed. Even his bruised pride could not withstand the daily grind. He cracked jokes in the evening, coaxing smiles from Adora, keeping sorrow at bay with humor and shared exhaustion. Through it all, Adora discovered resilience she never expected. Her dreams of the past, designer dresses, champagne evenings, became mere shadows, replaced by the solid satisfaction of surviving another day. What she missed most were not the luxuries, but the sense of purpose and belonging they'd once offered her. Lessons bloom. Yet each evening, as she counted profits or planned the next day, she felt a subtle pride. She had never worked for these things before. Now, every victory was hers, earned through sweat and faith. In these humble victories, The seeds of a new life were planted, watered by humility and determination. Gradually, the world around Adora began to shift. The market, once a place of noisy chaos, grew familiar. She learned the faces of regular customers, the cadence of gossip and barter. Some recognized her, first with disbelief, then with pity, and finally with respect. Rumors of the Obialo dynasty's collapse circled, but Adora carried herself with quiet dignity that challenged the whispers. She never denied who she'd been. Instead, she owned her new reality, telling anyone who asked, "Life changes. What matters is how you change with it." One day, a local merchant named Blessing approached her with an offer, a chance to manage a small stall as part of a cooperative, splitting profits with other women in the neighborhood. Blessing, herself a survivor of many setbacks, had watched Adora for weeks, admiring her courage and honesty. "It's not about what you lost," Blessing insisted. "It's about what you do now." Accepting the position marked an important step in Adora's journey. For the first time since her father's death, she was invited to contribute her skills, not her inheritance. The cooperative quickly flourished under her guidance. Adora introduced new strategies, cleaner displays, marketing tricks picked up from her father's business empire, even simple accountability ledgers. The team's profits soared, and a spirit of camaraderie eased her loneliness. Each day she invested in herself, in her work, and in the people around her. The market ceased to be a place of exile, transforming into a sanctuary built from shared struggle. Adora felt herself grow from the wounds, her identity reshaped by hard-won respect. The change in Adora's world reached her mother, who had remained a distant figure after the funeral, lost in her own storm of grief and adaptation. For months, their relationship had stalled, marked by brief phone calls and awkward visits where both tried and failed to bridge the chasm between their new lives. Yet word of Adora's perseverance filtered through extended family and community. Her mother, inspired and concerned, finally traveled across town for a heartfelt conversation. The meeting took place in the cramped space of Adora's flat. Tears flowed freely as secrets and regrets spilled out. Adora's mother admitted, sometimes shamefully, how she'd resented her husband's choices and envied her daughter's closeness with him. She confessed how, when fortune walked out the door, she had shut herself off, afraid to face the truth about status and loss. Adora listened, her heart softening as she realized how suffering had stripped them both, making honesty possible in ways it never had been before. Their reconciliation was gentle and powerful, no longer defined by wealth or what had been lost. They found common ground in their struggle. Adora's mother offered the wisdom of years, advising her to focus not on regaining riches, but on building a life of meaning. Together they made plans, little dreams, kind acts for neighbors, and a renewed commitment to each other. With every tear, they mended the fabric of their relationship, promising to hold on to the love that had survived everything else. The hardest test came with forgiving the pain inflicted by others. Adora knew the bitterness left by betrayal could poison every step forward, and so she resolved not to let anger calcify her heart. Letters went out, one to her uncle, another to long-lost cousins and friends. They were not pleas for reunion, nor accusations, but clear accounts of what she had learned, what she hoped they could understand. "I forgive you," she wrote, "because I want peace. I refuse to be chained by old wounds." Some responded with silence, others with indignant defenses, but a few, surprisingly, apologized. One cousin sent a simple note: "You taught me more now than you ever did with money." Adora found tears streaming down her face. In these rare moments, she realized that transformation was possible even after the deepest betrayal. Forgiveness was not forgetting. It was a choice to refuse bitterness, to claim freedom. She extended that same grace to herself, letting go of shame and regret. As time passed, Adora's confidence grew. She became a mentor to women in the cooperative, sharing not just business advice, but the deeper lessons of survival. Stories of her transformation traveled beyond the market. For those who listened, and there were many, she stood as living proof that dignity survived disaster, that love could grow where luxury failed. Eventually, the news of Adora's journey reached local journalists. One day, a young reporter asked for an interview in the market. How did the Obialo heiress survive losing everything? At first, Adora hesitated, wary of publicity that could revive old pains. But after discussing with Chick and her mother, she agreed, on one condition: tell the truth. Not the fairy tale about riches lost, but the reality of what happens when everything falls apart. The reporter listened as Adora spoke of her father's legacy, her husband's betrayal and redemption, her family's wounds, and the laughter and pain born from working in the cooperative. She described the lessons learned about false friends, resilience, forgiveness, and the unbreakable core of self-worth. Her story ran in print and online, sparking conversations throughout Lagos. Not every fall is fatal, she insisted. Sometimes you lose the world in order to find yourself. Public reaction surprised her. Many reached out, not for money, but to thank her for sharing truth that mirrored their own secret struggles. Adora received letters praising her courage, offering jobs, sending gifts of kindness. She felt something sacred in the attention, not the shallow worship she'd received before, but reverence for one who had endured and emerged changed. The wound of loss was still visible, but now it was the badge of a survivor, admired for resilience, not riches. As the days melted into months, Adora's story began to ripple outwards, inspiring change in places she never would have imagined during her privileged upbringing. Community leaders from neighboring districts invited her to speak about her experiences, asking her to offer guidance to young women struggling with poverty, rejection, and dashed dreams. Each time she addressed her room, her voice began with a simple hook: "I lost everything I thought defined me, but I found what no one could ever steal." The women listened intently, hanging on every detail, how she'd witnessed people's true natures in her time of need, how wealth couldn't buy authenticity, how survival was about persistence and community, not competition and envy. She encouraged them to trust in their own value, reminding them that dignity is self-built, not bequeathed. Slowly, Adora became a symbol for those seeking to reinvent themselves beyond the scars of hardship. Her advice was practical as well as emotional. Lessons bloom. She taught small business skills, helped organize community savings pools, and encouraged others to stand up for themselves in the face of exploitation or disdain. A group Adora led expanded from a handful of market women to a network of hundreds across Lagos. Women who refused to let poverty or past failures define their future. The market where she had once been the object of gossip was now a hub of empowerment. Daily life still involved struggle. Financial insecurity did not disappear. But Adora's world was rich in meaning. She and Chick, far from a fairy tale, continued to face challenges together. There were disagreements and days when hope faltered, but a new kind of partnership had evolved between them, one that was honest, equal, and rooted in mutual respect. One quiet evening, Adora returned home to find an elegant envelope slipped under her door. It bore a seal she recognized at once, a law firm long trusted by her family. Inside, a letter awaited her, penned by Mr. Mardu, her father's old lawyer. The message was brief but brimming with pride. "The trust you established remains untouched, waiting upon your command. Your father would be as proud of you now as he was the day you were born. Do not measure your worth by what you own, but by what you have risen from. If and when you are ready, your legacy is yours again." Tears traced warm lines down Adora's cheeks as she read it. The financial assets she'd hidden as part of her test had never mattered less. She had become the woman her father hoped for, not because of a fortune, but because she'd stared down despair and walked out transformed. That night, she held the letter against her heart and made a decision. She would reclaim her inheritance, but not to prop up old illusions. Instead, she would use it to serve the community that had lifted her and others out of darkness. She spoke to Chick, her mother, and Aisha, each voice adding new wisdom. Chick squeezed her hand. "Whatever you choose, I am with you now. I know the cost of losing you is greater than any fortune." Her mother wiped away tears, whispering the words she had longed to hear. "I am so proud." Adora worked with Mr. Mardu to reactivate her assets, now determined to deploy them in ways that honored her journey. She launched a foundation for women's entrepreneurship, providing microloans and business mentorship for those like herself, those whose talents had been underestimated, whose dreams had nearly been stolen by misfortune or betrayal. The cooperative market became the first beneficiary, expanding not only in size but in ambition. A celebration marked the new beginning, not a gala of wealth and pretense, but a festival of gratitude and hope. The market buzzed with life, music and laughter, entwined with speeches and tears of joy. Adora stood at the center, Aisha at her side and Chick holding her hand. Surrounded by friends and family, both old and newly forged. In her address, Adora spoke not of money, but of resilience. Her words were a promise. My father taught me to build empires, but life taught me to build people. From now on, I will not let one replace the other. Applause erupted, but more than public approval, it was the sense of shared destiny, of lives woven together that filled her soul. Months turned into a year, and the fruits of Adora's transformation ripened everywhere she looked. The market cooperative thrived, with women launching their own shops, supporting families, and sending children to school. Poverty could still be cruel, the world still contained loss, but now there were webs of support, a safety net of solidarity Adora had once lacked herself. Adora's own life mirrored this abundance. Her relationship with Chick and her mother, steeped in hard-won understanding, deepened with time. She took nothing for granted. Every kindness was cherished, every joy hard-earned. When hardship came, she faced it with the certainty that she was no longer alone. As a mentor, her story spread even beyond Lagos, inspiring distant communities. She knew she would always carry scars, but rather than symbols of loss, they became marks of survival. We are not what happened to us, but what we make from it, was the lesson she imparted to each new generation. In the quiet, private hours allowed by her new peace, Adora sometimes visited her father's grave, the resting place of the man whose love and ambition set her on this wild road. She brought flowers, sometimes a letter, and always a prayer of gratitude. Standing there, among others she had thought lost, she realized the greatest legacy her father left her was not wealth, but the strength to build her own path. Her father's life had been a saga of triumph over adversity. Now, hers was a story of turning loss into liberation. The city that once celebrated her for her fortune now honored her for her impact. Children from the market ran to greet her. Women stopped to thank her, and even former adversaries nodded in respect. Adora's tale had begun in the shadows of inheritance and expectation. Now it blazed with the light of self-discovery and compassion. Though wealth had once defined her boundaries, it was love, dignity, and perseverance that had, in the end, set her free. Her name, her heritage, her very soul had been remade, not by what she'd inherited, but by all she'd earned through courage and heart. And so, in a world that once measured value in naira and title, Adora Obialo became legend not for what she had, but for who she had chosen, against all odds, to become.